You're listening to the God Life Culture podcast, where faith
and what's trending
collide.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the God Life Culture podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so excited. We're grateful. We're thankful that you are tuned in for another episode of the God Life Culture podcast. We want you to take this moment right now, if you are not subscribed to our podcast, to hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening to us. Yes. If you are on YouTube watching us on YouTube, definitely click that like button, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you are listening to us on Apple and Spotify and have not checked out our YouTube channel, you can find us at God Life Culture Podcast, and you can check out the awesome visual to our episodes and get all of our facial expressions, our reactions, and all of those great things.
Yeah,
we're definitely excited for all of you who have joined us on this journey. All of our new listeners and subscribers and people who have followed us in these last few weeks, we are very grateful and thankful for your support.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, today's episode, it kind of reminded me a little bit, almost 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago. I think it was in our first season. We did an episode called "I'm Leaving the Church."
Yeah.
And it was, I think our conversation really was more of reasons why we stay.
Yeah.
Reasons why we stay in our church or stay in church in general or continue to serve the Lord.
Which, by the way, I believe that episode, if you scroll like on Apple and Spotify,
we re-released it.
Yep, it's up there. So
okay, so yes, if you haven't checked it out yet, please go back and listen to it. But the other day, I think it was like last week, I was scrolling. Every once in a while, I go on these like websites, Christian websites, and read certain articles. Relevant magazine had an article that jumped out at me, which was 5 really bad reasons to leave your church. And it jumped out at me because of their 5 reasons, but I also think it's a different take from that conversation we had many years ago. And even if there are certain subjects that kind of overlap with what we spoke about before, it's quite possible that our views on those things are maybe different.
Absolutely.
So, you know, even though we maybe said X, Y, and Z 3-4 years ago, life and circumstances maybe have us thinking about those things a little different. So 5 really bad reasons to leave your church. And just off the jump, just by listening to that title, what was it that you thought of? Because I mentioned this to you last week.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately, one of the things that came to mind was the fact that there are way more than 5 reasons. So in my head, I was like, I wonder what are the top 5 they came up with, which we'll dive into in the article. But I do think that this is a conversation, a topic of conversation that is very relevant, right?
Yes.
It's very, familiar, because I think now more than ever, we see a lot of people who are, walking away from their faith, walking away from the church, having a lot to say about the church. Yeah. We have individuals who are in a constant pursuit of a perfect church. And that is an idea that we've spoken about so many times. And we hear this even in our churches, right? People talking about, you'll never find the perfect church. The minute you walk in, it's not perfect anymore. So this is a topic of conversation that isn't new, but I think as the years progress, the idea of the church and the idea of church is not as important to people as it once was. Yeah, possibly, and I think that, we hear more and more this idea of like, church is not necessary. I don't need to go to church to be saved. I don't need to commit to a church. And we kind of hear this, topic of conversation. But a lot of the reasons that they listed, or the 5 reasons that they listed, we agree with some things, right? We have thoughts on those things. We kind of have our disagreements and our takes on all of that. But the first reason that they list on here, for reasons why people decide to leave their church, is I'm not being fed.
Well, the other thing that I also wanted to make clear is a couple of things. It's a whole list that I got happening. The first thing is, I do think it's important to give their perspective, the author's perspective on what they said, and then whether or not we agree with that and the reasons for that not to. I think it's also important to understand that the perspective from someone's opinion or people's perspectives vary from years that they've been in a church, years that they've been serving the Lord, and the level of commitment in which they've been serving God. I think that those all vary or are are factors in how they perceive certain things. So I think we're speaking from perspectives of individuals that have been in church for a long hot minute. Your whole life.
Yeah.
And then for me, basically the same thing. So I was like around 5 years old. Also, two individuals who made the conscious effort to serve God at a really early age. Because I think there's a difference between, I grew up in church, but then when did you really start putting in the work? When I was 23. Yeah, no, we've been doing it since we were kids. And that's not to say it in a way like, like we're raising ourselves up, but it's, people that have really been involved, not only in the area, but also involved in the area for a very long time.
And it's like we were talking kind of before we started recording very quickly about the idea of that thought, but also how to express it in a way, like you said, that we don't make ourselves seem like, we have all the answers, right?
We don't.
Just because, we absolutely do not. But I think it's because this type of conversation, when you talk about leaving the church, and I don't think this conversation is dealing with leaving your faith or walking away from your faith. It's more like going from one church to another.
Yeah, congregation to another. Yeah.
I think in order to have that conversation and dissect reasons why and talk about it and talk about leadership and all of these things, you have to be an individual that has put in work.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say and leave a church simply because you don't like what they do, you didn't like their ideas, they didn't do things like this, they didn't do things like that, but you never gave input, you didn't go to any type of meeting, creative meeting, you didn't give your opinion, you didn't ask to speak to a leader, you didn't ask to speak to somebody who, ran a certain ministry to give your ideas and maybe how you can help. So there are different types of people, right, who can address this conversation, right? Or attempt to address it. And I think there are only a few of those individuals who can actually be effective with what they say. And at the end of the day, speaking from a place of experience, where when things got hard, they just didn't leave. When their ideas weren't, mentioned or thought of, or their ideas weren't acknowledged, they didn't just pick up their bags and go somewhere else where their ideas were, right? So I think we have both been in a place throughout the years, not, just now, but as even children, right, where we have helped, we have assisted, we have given ideas, we have started things, we have started projects, we have done different things where now at this point, having a conversation like this, I feel 100% confident and, able to really have the conversation. So I just want to say that because I think it's important to know who's having this conversation. Because again, you can get somebody that just doesn't like to work, and because things aren't done the way they want it to be, they find it easy to just get up and leave, right?
True.
Those aren't the people we're addressing. Those aren't the type of people having this conversation.
Very true. So like you said, the first reason that this author thinks that it's a bad reason to leave a church is for using the excuse that I'm not being fed. And I think that they base their opinion on this little thing that they wrote, which is to leave a church because you're not getting enough is a cop-out. Your primary call in church is to contribute, not just to consume. As a Christian, you shouldn't require spoon feeding for the rest of your life. Eventually, you need to learn how to feed yourself so that in time, you can actually feed others. So they're saying to say that you're not being fed is not good enough an excuse because it's a selfish mentality. What do you think about that?
I think anytime you phrase things, right, with the word I, me, my, mine, right, you can automatically say it's a selfish motive or selfish desire, which at times it absolutely can be. Are there moments where individuals are saying they're not being fed and that is not the actual reason why they're leaving a church? Yes. Is the reason why you're not being fed because you don't want to listen to the person that's speaking or preaching because you have a problem with them? Okay. Is the reason why you're not being fed because you don't want to, open your mind or, kind of get out of the box that you think God, this is the only way God can speak to me. And then you have a pastor or a speaker at your church, a preacher that isn't, subjected to that box. So you just tune them out, right? Because those aren't justified reasons for you to say you're not being fed. Yeah. Right. Now, are there moments where there are individuals, who may be a part of a church of new believers, right? There are churches I know of that their primary focus is to get, new converts and new believers in and kind of like disciple them, right? Yeah. So if you have a church filled with new people and believers that, just converted and people who are just starting in their faith, right? And you've been on this journey for 27 years, right? And the messages to you may seem a little like, basic, or may seem watered down, or like principles that, you know of already that you just wish they just went a little bit deeper in, then maybe I can understand you saying that you're not being fed.
Yeah.
But if your reasons for saying I'm not being fed is selfish, right? Or self-centered, or because you have a problem with the way, that individual speaks, or the content, or how they speak, or, you just don't like them for whatever reason and have had problems with them, that is not a good reason.
Yeah, and I think that one of the key things, because it's very true, I think that as a pastor, you have the really tough job of having to cater to different degrees of spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
Like you said, you may have a bunch of newcomers, so you can't do a whole theological preaching that's mad deep, that you're breaking down this, that, all these different meanings. But in the flip side of it, you also have to care about your older, more, seasoned church members who do like to deep dive into the Bible and to really break down scripture and all of that. So as a pastor, it's something that I don't envy. I'm one of those people that when people try to come at you with a pastoral calling, I am running out the door, because I'm like, that's too much. It's too heavy. It's too complicated of a job to deal with. And for the people that, like they love that and they want to do that, kudos to you. But it's very difficult because you have a congregation full of many different levels of people. That's why I do agree with one thing that he's saying, which is the idea of being able to know how to feed yourself. I think it is important that if, let's say, the pastor is doing a series that is really heavy on like Christianity 101, and you feel like you have Christianity 101 down packed, that doesn't mean that now you jump ship and it's like, all right, I'll come back in 4 months when you're done with that theme. Yeah. It's like, you know what? You stay, you contribute, you take the little that you can from it because you feel like you're an expert, but on the side, you should be doing your own thing. On the side, you should be, listening to the other preachings, or reading the word yourself, or building Bible studies on your own, or taking maybe what the pastor said in that Sunday preaching and be like, you know what? We can take this out and we can dissect this, and maybe in a small group, we'll do that. Like, there's things that you can do.
Yeah. And also, like you said, the idea that the only time you're like listening or reflecting on God's word is when you come to church, then that's your problem right there.
Yeah.
So like if the only time you worship and listen to worship music and kind of get into that zone is on Sunday, then that's a problem.
Yep.
Right. So if you feel like you're not being fed because the content that's being delivered or the messages are so basic, or it already, right? One, I guarantee you don't know everything.
True.
Right. Two, look for the new thing, right? That you probably, didn't know or forgot.
Yeah.
Right. But also then how are you feeding yourself, not just so you can be well fed, but so then you can feed others.
True.
Because then if you got it down packed, there are probably a lot of people here who don't.
Yeah.
How are you helping those people?
Yes.
Right. Are you just looking, again, to feed yourself, fill yourself up, and then just so you're good and you're full.
And I think that situations also vary, because in a preaching, you can't like pipe up and be like, hey, pastor, I have a thought. Like, no, sit down. Let me finish this thing. But if you're in a small group setting or in a Bible study setting where conversation is welcomed, then, and you feel like the conversation is a little babyish, then give, ¿cómo se dice? Apoya la conversación.
Yeah.
Like,
contribute to
the conversation as well. And maybe you can also lead the conversation to a way that gets maybe a degree more deeper or a degree more in detail that everyone can benefit from as well. Instead of you just sitting there moping, or instead of you being like, I'm not going to that's mad babyish. It's like, no, there is a level of responsibility that goes on you as the individual to make sure that you are being a wheel that is working for versus against.
And
what are you gonna say?
And you just want to make sure that when you say statements like this, right? When you say this, that it's visible.
Yes. When you say statements like, I'm not being fed. Yes.
That we can see that you're nice and full. You know what I mean? So then you're not being fed by the pastor, but you got like, some things. You're good.
Okay, let me put that in regular English. So that means that if you're saying you're not being fed because the idea is because you're nice and full, then if you're given an opportunity to do something, you should be killing it. You should be crushing it. That's what you're saying. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and if you're saying I'm not being fed, right? But like you barely come to church to know what the messages are about.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you know what we're talking about. You're never here.
True.
Right? If you say I'm not being fed, we shouldn't look at you and visibly see like you're not okay. You know what I mean? True. So I like, because I've heard this before. People say this, and again, it's not that they're not being fed. It's that they don't want to be here anymore for whatever reason. And people love the excuse of I'm not being fed. Because listen, for those who don't know, I'm a pastor's son, so I have a lot of feelings and thoughts on this topic, right? Yeah. But again, you just have to be careful. You want to make sure when you're saying what you're saying that you can back it up with your life.
Yes. Yeah, because I think that really what the author and you're also bringing up as well is that a lot of people use that as a scapegoat.
Yes.
Really, oh, I'm not being fed. Okay, but then what else are you doing in your life that aligns with your Christian walk, walking in the right direction? Because if we sat down to dissect it and to ask you 43 questions, you wouldn't know how to answer them. You're like, oh, I don't do this. I don't pray. I don't read the word. I don't fast. I don't seek God. You don't do none of those things on your time, but then you're not getting fed. So then even if you were getting fed, homie, you're not growing because you're not doing anything on an individual level to lift yourself up.
Right. And if you're not being fed, you claim that that's true.
Yeah.
And you are a leader, but fail miserably at every task you're given. But then you're using the excuse that you're not being fed. That's not cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's, again, an excuse. For some reason, there's a reason why you just don't want to be here. And that seems to be a popular one, which I love when, you know, he said that in this article. I could see that because I've seen it before. Yeah,
and you know there are the rare occasions, like you said, which is that it could be a church that is strictly heavy focused on like new beginners and, you know, new converts that give their hearts to the Lord. If they're fully staffed and they have all the bases covered and they don't need you just because, you know what, we have everybody here. You know, I'm just a wasted resource because they really don't need me. Not in a bad way, just because we're flowing with potential. Then I think that, you know, with God's, you know, it's okay to move out and to go somewhere else that you could be better utilized.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that are like, oh, you know, I'm not getting used here and I'm just going to jump ship. And it's kind of like, you weren't doing nothing to begin with.
Yeah.
First of all, you were like, who are you again? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But okay, let's move on to the next subject.
Let's move on because that could be a whole
minute.
Yes. Reason number 2 that he says people leave the church is because it's getting too big.
Yeah.
You know, there are some individuals who like to be a part of small churches.
Yes.
Right? And it's funny because they say that, but I think it's because they've never been in a big church before. So this is their only experience, right? Because I hear this a lot, right? Like, I don't know if I could be in a church that big, and like, how would I see you? Like, you know, when would we ever see each other in a service? There's so many people, like, you know, and that, I guess, lack of connection and community within the people in their church kind of scares people, right? When churches, you know, when people talk about growing a church, right, and it getting too big. To me, this is like not a problem. Like, you want your church to grow. So like, if your goal and focus, you know, and you being at a church and you just love the fact that it's just so small and there's 32 people there and those 32 people have been there for 42 years, it's almost like, okay, so like, where's the vision in this place?
Yes.
Like this is where we're gonna stay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there should be a desire to want to grow.
Absolutely.
And if you are a part of a church, you should have the desire that you want a church to grow. You want the church you are a part of to grow and grow big. Now, the real question is, why is the church growth of it getting too big affecting you?
I think of 2 reasons. The first one I think of, if we're speaking about in the perspective of relationships, is the reality that those relationships are fragile. That if it wasn't because of the small setting of you constantly seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week, you guys wouldn't be friends to begin with. So it's like, oh no, if we add more people, you know, so-and-so is no longer going to be my friend because now there's more people that they could be friends with. Because if you have a strong relationship with someone, it doesn't matter if they move to Canada, if they move to a different continent. At the end of the day, you know, the relationship may not be the same, but that's a strong relationship that'll continue to flourish. The other idea that I can think of is the mentality of a big fish in a small pond. So or a small lake, whatever the phrase is. So it's kind of the idea of, oh, but I'm like the star with the 32. If we start to get more people, somebody may come and outshine me. So that's number 1. You ain't no star. You know, the star is Jesus, and we're gonna get like real cheesy about it.
Right.
You know, so number 1, those are both selfish mentalities.
Yeah.
The number one, it can't get too big because then I'm going to lose my contact with my buddies. Then those relationships aren't strong enough. And then if you're thinking about the idea of, well, then other people are going to come and outshine me and maybe take the positions that I've had for 33 years, is like, yeah, but you've had that position, but that ministry hasn't grown. So maybe we do need the new people to come in and to help you out, or for you to take a step back and let them take it and make it grow as well.
Yeah.
So the only reason I would think is for selfish reasons, and why somebody would have a problem with the church actually growing.
Absolutely. Like, again, I'm thinking more the perspective of people coming to a church. The church is growing, and now you're intimidated by these new people because these new people bring new talents, new gifts, new abilities, new ideas, fresh ideas. And like you said, if you are used to being the one, if you are used to, having a certain way of doing things, and now you have people coming in and they're saying, wait a minute, that's how you do it? Have you ever thought about doing it this way? And it's actually a very good idea, and it improves what you are doing. You should be okay and saying, yeah, you should work alongside me. Let's make this happen.
True.
For the most part, though, what happens is people are very territorial.
Unnecessarily so.
Right?
Yeah.
Very territorial with what they have been given. And yes, most of the times when they are that way, they are territorial, and again, they don't have what's needed to really back that up. You're territorial of something that isn't growing or that isn't flourishing or that we don't see results in. So again, new people coming into a church to grow a church, right, and that God is bringing, that should not intimidate you or put fear in you. And if it does, again, check yourself before
absolutely.
It gets to the point where you say, I'm leaving. Yeah.
The next really bad reason, quote unquote, is I don't agree with everything that is being preached. And, that happens. I think that there are times where things are preached that isn't, because I think there's a difference. So I think that when we're speaking about biblical truths, that's a non-negotiable for me. If we're speaking about Bible and principles about the Christian faith, if you don't like it, too bad. Like, if you want to serve God, that's kind of what you need to do or not need to do. Then I think that there are certain things that it really depends on the church culture or like other things like that or whatever that kind of sometimes is like, I don't really agree with that, but I mean, it's not whatever. Like, I think you need to have a level of maturity as well to know that, sometimes there are things that maybe you don't agree with it being done in a certain way or being executed in a certain way or certain like standards of certain things and how they're said, but then being okay with, what, is that really a hill I want to die on and really fight the church about? Yeah. Sometimes it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the times, too, where people say this, I feel like they say this not because they necessarily disagree, but because they're thinking of the exception, right? So, yeah, that's true, but they're looking for the but in the example. They're looking for, that works, but in this case, it doesn't. And that, you know what I mean? So when you are on the hunt for something, like when you are wanting to leave a church, you are looking for every possible reason to justify you leaving that church, right? So if you are looking for a reason to leave a church and the pastor says something that you kind of have the loophole and you find the loophole or find the exception, that is what you are going to, and you see, he said this and, this is what happened to me and I couldn't have done that. That doesn't apply. I can't do that, right? I don't agree with that. You know what? I should be able to, right? So again, it's when you are looking for something, you will find it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And even when it's a bad reason to leave a church, you will find the reason and try to justify it for yourself.
Try to justify it for yourself. I do want to note that the author that wrote this is an actual pastor.
Yes. And you have to read that first paragraph.
Yes.
It's actually really good.
And for his for the point number 3, which is I don't agree with everything that is being preached, his response is, you know what? Neither do I. And I'm the pastor. As such, I fully reserve the right to disagree with myself. And every now and then I do exactly that. Why? Because I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm asking questions, and my hope is that those that I pastor are doing likewise, which I agree with. Yeah. Sometimes you have to have conversations, and sometimes, you may have a way of thinking that at the moment the pastor maybe said, I don't agree with that. But then in conversation and really like digging deep into what that means and the reasons why, you come to be like, you know what, it's true. I didn't see it from that perspective. I was looking at it from a different perspective, but you know what? It's right. Yeah. And you keep it moving.
Absolutely. Reason number 4. That's a bad reason to leave a church.
Yes.
Is my needs aren't being met.
Dun, dun, dun.
My needs, not my knees, my needs
My
aren't
needs.
being met.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? When you hear that
Yes.
right off the bat, you see someone, my needs aren't being met.
Well, the first question is, what does that mean to you? Because I think that
Yes.
means different things to
yeah.
different people.
Yeah. What are your
Because
needs?
somebody could be like, oh, but that's the same thing as I'm not being fed, right? That could be a perspective. I don't think it's the same thing. I think that when it comes, and my perspective of it is that you're looking for the extra stuff that you think a church community should provide for you. So whether it is that you're looking for, a women's group that is doing X, Y, and Z, or you're looking for a youth group that's doing X, Y, and Z, or a men's group that's doing this, that, and the third, or you're looking for a specific type of small Bible study, there's certain things that you would think to look for in a church community. And it's kind of like, there's nothing happening. Like, none of that stuff is happening, or it's happening at a caliber that isn't what you think it should be happening at. And those are that's personally, you may have a different opinion. When I would think of what my needs aren't being met, it's because of that. Because there are other like maybe the pastor kills it every Sunday or every Tuesday when he preaches or whatever. But outside of that, ain't nothing else happening. So then it's kind of like, you start to weigh it out. Like, okay, the preaching is really good, but there's no fellowship. Or the preaching is really good, but there's no outreach. The preaching is really good, but there's no this, there's no that. So then you start to be like, well, I'm not, all the other stuff that I need, I'm not getting either.
Yeah. And I absolutely understand that. And again, I think it comes from the perspective. It depends on the person saying that,
Yeah.
because then I think of individuals who have all of those great things, right? But they don't like how the women's ministry has this tea night once a month, and they don't like talking to other people. So like to them, it's like, I just can't, so like that's like something that weighs heavy on them. And it's like, really? Then just don't go to that. You know what I mean? But then there are situations where it's like, our men's ministry, we don't do anything. You know what I mean? And I just feel like, there's a lot of like older men, or there's a lot of younger men, and I'm kind of like middle-aged. Like, I don't know. Like, it's hard to, that may be a justifiable reason for you. Now, is that a reason for you to leave your church? I still don't think so.
Yeah.
I think, what did you do? What questions did you start asking? Right? Did you ask to maybe help that leader do something?
Yeah.
Whether it's a small group, a Bible study night, offer your home for something. And then since it's at your home, you're kind of hosting it. You give some ideas and some perspective. You know what I mean? So again, if you're just looking for the reason, there's always going to be a reason.
Yeah.
But
True.
there are definitely moments, I can agree, where there are certain needs that we have, right? And I think in certain seasons, they may not be met, and it's almost like being okay with that, knowing that, you know what? For right now, this is what I need. And my church honestly doesn't have this right now. You know what I mean? It's either like, sit back, reflect. Are you going to be the one to start that? Or do you know that this is kind of a seasonal thing for you?
Yeah.
And it's not, again, something that's so important that it's a hill you're willing to just die on. It's almost like, no, you know what? Like, it's okay. And there can be different seasons. I know individuals who are very, to themselves and introverted. And then they kind of go through a period of time where they feel like, I actually do need people and I want to fellowship with other people. And then they realize that their church really doesn't have too much of that. You don't really need a church ministry to fulfill that need for you. Why don't you go make friends within your church and go talk to people? You know what I mean? So I think a lot of times the needs that individuals lack in certain places or in churches, or that they may feel, if there's not a ministry within your church that can meet that need, then check and see, does this have to be a ministry within your church?
Yeah.
What can you do to help meet this need with your own life?
Yeah.
Right? So like, if you feel once a week going to church is not good, like for me, I need more. My needs in this church aren't being met. So like, what are you doing Monday through Saturday to help fill that void?
Yeah.
Like, do you go to the prayer night on Monday? Like, do you go to
the Bible study?
The Bible study? Do you go to the youth service? Like, what is it about Sunday that you just feel you need more of those throughout the week? How are you, filling yourself? You know what I mean? So again, this reason about your needs not being met, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, and I think that when the reasoning is legitimate, like, no, literally there's a specific thing that I really need, and it's not happening. 9 times out of 10, you're not the only one that feels that way.
Yeah.
There are other people that may be also feeling the same way, that certain need isn't being met. So it's kind of like you said. So the idea is, Stop making it more about me, little old me. Let me cry in a corner and complain about it. And I was like, you know what? I see an opportunity. So it's an opportunity now for you to be like, you know what? Let's try to put something together. Let's try to do this. And you know what? Let's give it a go, because I've always been that type of person.
Yeah.
Which is always like, I see something, I'll give a suggestion. If the suggestion is taken or not, I wait and see. Maybe the suggestion was ignored. Maybe the suggestion was taken and not executed the way it was supposed to. So then I wait again, and then I try again. And it's always like, I always give it a couple of times before it's either like, okay, let me do it. let me go ahead and try to do it. Not because I need to show you how to do it, because I need to show you how to do it. And it sounds messed up, but it really is how it is. And then other times it's really like, you know what? It's a thing where maybe it isn't the right time for it. So I need to like walk away and let it go. Because I think it's important to understand that topic that you're saying about seasons. Sometimes you are really like hard about, it needs to be now, we need to get this done now. And sometimes it's like, yeah, but the timing isn't right for that, because in this occasion, you're the only one that feels that way. They're not up to that yet. They're still 3-4 chapters behind you. We got to give them a little bit of time to catch up, to then make sure to do whatever it is that you want to do and it be successful. Because then if you start something too early or too soon, it's kind of like, yeah, it didn't work out. Well, it didn't work out because the timing was wrong.
Yeah. And like I said, not everything needs to come directly from your church.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I remember a few years back, right before the pandemic hit, right? I had this, I love to read. I always read and all these things. And I remember thinking like, man, like I wish like our church would have a book that a few people were reading and like, would kind of get together to talk about. So I was like, hey, after a while of like thinking that, I was like, why don't I just start something and try to do it? And I remember it was January, February, and then COVID happened, in March, where everything was locked down. But I remember we were reading the book To Hell with the Hustle, right, by Jefferson Bethke. And it was in our first meeting we had, I remember 13 people. In our second meeting we had 17. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know, are people going to like this? Are they going to be, interested? And I remember hearing people say like, I've always loved the concept of reading, but I've never really gotten into it. And like, this is cool. Or I never really liked like, going to a coffee shop and like, I've never been here. So it's not right. Like you start to see how people connect to different things, right?
That's what
but now that wasn't a ministry of our church. You know what I mean? The church wasn't putting this together. The church wasn't going out there. It was something that I, from the church, right, had this idea, put it together, executed it. And there were a lot of individuals here within the church that said, wait a minute, that's something that's kind of cool. I think I would benefit from that, right? So again, I could have sat back and been like, man, my church doesn't read books, and I want to read a book and discuss it. You know what I mean? My needs aren't being met. It's like, do something about that then. If you are doing things correctly, right? Because again, if the needs you're talking about that aren't being met, it's like, bro, because we don't live, the world does not revolve around you. You know what I mean? This church doesn't cater to you. That's like a you thing, right? But again, if it's something that will benefit the body and benefit, others, then go with it.
Yeah, and I think that the other good thing about that, and using that example of the book club thing or the book thing, was that different people went for different reasons and got different things out of it. There were people that it was the book aspect of it. Like, you know what? I like to read, and now we're reading together. There was people that it was the discussion aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I like reading and having people to talk about it, but nobody's ever reading the same book as me. And then there was other people that were just there for the chelcha. They were just there because of the hangout, because they don't really.
Because there were people that were there that didn't read.
They didn't read the book,
but they were there because they benefited from the conversation, discussion.
That's the other thing.
And then they would go back and be like, I had to go reread that part because I didn't. That was good. That was good.
That's
so
true.
Again, you have to realize there's other ways to sometimes meet those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. The last reason that they put down, which is one that I think that at one time or another, every single person in the church has maybe experienced this, which is maybe not unresolved, but it is conflict.
Yeah.
But their position is unresolved conflict as being a really bad reason to leave the church. And, I think that, like I said before, conflict is something that is going to happen. The degree of conflict varies from person to person, situation to situation. It could just be that you passed by someone and didn't say hi to them, but it wasn't on purpose. You just really were like on the go. Your kid was about to run out the door and you just whizzed right past everybody to get the kid. And then so-and-so felt like he ignored me. And then now they're walking around with this hurt of you ignoring them.
Yeah.
To the degrees where people bump heads. Whether they're planning on stuff together or like you were mentioned before, sometimes somebody will go to someone and give them a suggestion about something like, hey, I really thought that, maybe next time when we do X, Y, and Z, we could do it like this. And they take offense to that. And then there's other people that are just rude and are disrespectful and made you feel that way, invalid reasons you feel that way. And sometimes, those are people that you have to deal with as well. There's a lot of degrees to it. Now, I think that the key to what the author is saying is unresolved conflict, which is, I had an issue with you. I made a whole big stink about it. I'm leaving. Like, that's messy, and that, I think, is wrong to do. Like, you don't just throw a bomb, and then I was like, all right, you guys pick up the pieces. I'm out. Like, that's messed up. And I think that is not a good reason to leave a church.
Listen, conflict is inevitable, like you said. I think regardless if we're talking about a church, job, your family, friendships, there will always be conflict at one point. Yeah. Right? You will always face that. Now, when we talk in the church aspect, right, from a leadership perspective and standpoint, you need to have thick skin. Yes. And you need to be ready to have conflict. Mm-hmm. You need to be ready to have hard conversations. Mm-hmm. You need to be ready to say things that may not, that could possibly hurt people's feelings if said incorrectly. Yeah. Right? You have to work with telling people, some harsh truths, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of situations about being in a church with individuals that can make things uncomfortable when it comes to conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if you're in a leadership position, right? An added factor to this is when you have friends within your church. Because a lot of people, when they get to a church, right, they're those individuals who church to them, a lot of their friendships don't thrive within their church. Yeah. For some individuals. For others, many of their friendships
are strictly
within their church. Yeah. And they have, acquaintances and people that they connect with outside, their coworkers, things like that. But their church people, these are their people, right? So think of, again, your family and issues you've had with your families or cousins and this one and that one and things, right? Now picture all of those cousins and whatever in your church, right? And you see them all the time and you're with them all the time. Yeah. And now you're friends and you're close friends. But now, one of your close friends is also in charge of a certain ministry that you are a part of. Right. And they have to kind of tell you like, hey, I've asked you like a few times, you're a part of it. I need you, to do this, that, and the other thing. You haven't done it yet. Like, when are you going to do it? They're your friend, but in this point, they're your leader. Yeah. So it's like, you need to kind of switch up the perspective and realize, okay, like, I know we're cool, but I really do have to do this. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of different reasons within friendships where conflict arises within churches. And I think that this is why a lot of times people choose to leave, right? If I were to go through any of these things on this list, right, or even just outside things, if we were to add to this list of reasons why people leave, I think conflict would be number one for me, right? Whether it's an internal conflict with yourself for whatever reason, but I think 90% of the time it's a conflict that individuals have with someone else. Yeah. And I think when it comes to unresolved conflict, right, it's, conflict that people just don't put in the work and effort to try to make amends, right? And try to restore that friendship or relationship, or they try to talk things out. I think a lot of times people, when the conflict happens, when the bomb drops, when things go left, that's it. And it's in that moment where you have the choice to make. Am I going to confront the situation, or do I just, quit, leave, move on, and leave that unresolved, behind me? So again, I definitely think that conflict is a reason why people leave. And I think it's a big reason why people leave. And
I think it's not always centered around the, the scenario of leader versus someone in your team. 9 times out of 10, I think that's not the reason. It's everybody else with their situations. And I think that it is important to not. One of the issues that I always have when it comes to like conflicts within a church or in a friend setting or whatever, is the idea of the resolution not really being done successfully. So it's kind of like the idea of they had a disagreement, or they fought, or someone said something to someone that said something, like whatever the situation may be or whatever. They'll come to church that Sunday, go to the front for prayer, cry, hug it out, and then that's it. Like, they never sat down and spoke about it. They never were like, listen, these are the things that you did that, really upset me. Right. Or these are the things that you did that I felt.
It's a cop-out. It's
or whatever.
A way,
and it's always that whole thing about we cried about it. We prayed, they prayed over us about it. And then, but what always happens, always, because I see it all the time, is give it 3 months. it'll be the exact same scenario again. So it was like they go from being really close friends to now they're talking about each other behind their back to they came to the front and they prayed together and they cried. And it's like this whole cycle that doesn't get broken because they're not putting in the correct work into it.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to really resolve a conflict between people, then you have to speak about it. And I think it goes, we spoke about this, I believe it was last year as well, where sometimes there are certain friendships that is like you have to speak about it. I think it was when we had Priscilla on. We were speaking about the idea that sometimes you have to let people go.
Yeah.
You know, that is a case. Sometimes you're going to make the choice to stay in the same church and you guys will be able to work in ministry. But then when it comes to like, let's go out to eat or let's go out and party at my house or that's not going to happen no more.
And that's what people have. Yeah. People have a hard time with that.
They do.
You know, and I think that that is a reason there are people that can't handle that.
Yes.
Right. The idea of, you know, we're not going to be able to be friends anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to be willing. And again, speaking from a leadership perspective, you have to be willing to still work with those individuals when it comes to the church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yes, you had a conflict. Yes, you had a disagreement. But the minute we enter into this church, that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Now, is that easy? Absolutely not. Right? Where you have to be in the same room with these individuals. You have to work together with them. You may have to sit and brainstorm ideas with them to get, like, you know, that is hard. But this is what it requires.
Yeah.
You know what I
think
mean?
it shows a level of maturity when you're able to sit across or sit in a table with a group of people where not everyone is your friend, or maybe you did have a disagreement with someone.
Yeah.
But you walk in there very neutral. You speak about what needs to be spoken about. You address things professionally the way that it's supposed to be done. And then you get up and you leave. Like the unnecessariness of like, you know, the underhand comments or the little side this or the looks it was like, that just shows a level of immaturity on your end. You know, not you specifically. You know what I mean? I'm talking to you. On that person's end, you know, and it's kind of like, I've been put in situations like that where I just look at them and I'm like, you're 93. Like, you should already know how to walk into a situation and not let certain things get to you.
Right.
But unfortunately, age has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It really is up to the individual to be able to go and be like, you know what, I have to man up or I have to woman up. And be like, you know what, whatever situation it was, it has nothing to do with the certain thing that we're talking about or the ministry thing that we're working on. So that gets put to the side. If we can address it and we can speak about it, we can. If we walk out of there with an understanding that we're not on the same page and we disagree on that, then that stays there and you keep going. Now, if you're unable to, because it's that big of a dramatic thing for you, then this is why I see people leave.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, when people have issues, because I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
When people have issues with their jobs and people, their coworker, their boss, they will stick it out.
They sit there and eat it.
They will be humble. They will put their head down. They will go to work every day, still on time, still will do what they have to do. But they have a little scuffle with somebody in the church. Forget about it. Forget about it. But your boss that you go up and talk about and complain that they're, you know, giving you such a miserable time, or that coworker giving you such a miserable time, you're still at that job. You don't ask to get moved. You don't ask for them to relocate you to another state, right? Again, there is always the exception to these things and situations and all that,
the comments
right?
are, I moved to another
I know,
state.
you know, he was stalking me. Yes, move. You know, do what you have to do. But there are moments where I feel like when it comes to the church, we will never do things like this in our job. Yeah. We will show up to our jobs, give our best, do our best, regardless if, you know, we're having conflict or whoever it is, we do what we have to do. Yeah. But then it seems like when we are in the church setting, when God is our boss, right? When this is our job and what we have to do, it really is dependent on how we feel. Yeah. And it's really dependent on how the other person is treating us today. Yeah. And really dependent on who got us mad or who we got mad, you know? And I think that is something that definitely needs to change.
And like with everything that we speak about, there are exceptions to each and every rule. You know, if you're put in a situation where your life is in danger, then absolutely get out and go. If you put in a situation where your reputation is being dragged through the mud and is like, I don't need to sit here and take this, you get up and go as well. You know, I have been in situations where I should have left and it's kind of like, you know what, but God has a purpose, so let me just sit and chill. I think that's more difficult. for when you're put in a situation that someone put you in a situation, and then you have to sit there and be like, Lord, you already know that I got the receipts, or Lord, you already know that this is not true, but God is like, but you need to chill, you need to give it a minute. Those are the most difficult moments, because it's easy for them to leave, because it's like I said, it's very easy for someone to make an escándalo and then be like, oh, I feel like the victim, let me go. But then you leave everybody else having to deal with the situation, or the person that you made the escándalo about is having to sit there and deal with it. So I think that there are situations where, yes, you got to get up and leave, because that's not a safe environment, because unfortunately there are churches that are not healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are churches that have people in leadership positions that are selfish, self-centered, egotistical, all those negative things that you could absolutely, yes, they are. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and be like, every church is perfect. No, it's not. But majority of churches, I hope, are not like that.
Yeah.
You know, so there are times that you're the egotistical maniac that's trying to make things about you that is not.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, there are reasons and there are moments where God may be calling you to leave your church.
Yes.
You know, but God will never allow you to leave a place and leave in a mess.
Yeah.
Causing a mess, causing disruption, causing division, causing separation, causing pain, causing hurt. You know what I mean? Like, when God moves you for whatever reason, you know, I want to believe that he's doing it with the best method in mind, with the best intentions, the best way. And when God sets things up, right? Because I've seen people who move and there was no beef, there's nothing, they literally moved. I've seen people who have, you know, left a church and gone to another church, and they speak very highly of the church they left from, and it was just, you know, different reasons or whatever. There are people that get married, right, and then they go to their spouse's church, right? So there's so many different reasons that people leave, where it's okay, right? If God is calling you to do that, then great.
Yes.
You know, I think the problem lies where things get difficult, right? Things get hard in whatever way. Conflict with individuals, conflict with yourself. You know, for some reason, you don't feel like you're being fed. You don't feel like you're, you know, that things are the same. Your church, you know, is going through a rough time. Yeah. And I believe that every church, regardless if you are, you know, a mega church or local church, right, you will go through a season where it's not what it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will go through a tough season. And that is where the individuals that are a part of that church really get tested. And that is where you really see where people's loyalty lies, where their heart lies, their purpose, their drive, the reason why they are there is seen in hard moments. Yeah. Do you walk away and leave because your church is going through a hard moment, right? And if that's what you're choosing to do, you better walk away and leave, because you tried everything within your power to fix, to help, to make work, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
You know? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times people are not doing that. You know, things get hard, so they leave. Yeah. Things get difficult, so they already try to find their way of escape. And all of a sudden, right? We see this all the time. All of a sudden, other churches look real nice. All of a sudden, they love other pastors. And all of a sudden, they're listening to this church and this pastor and this teacher and this person, right? It's easy to compare what you have to others around you and find the best in everyone else. Yeah. You know, it seems great over there, seems perfect over here. This is good, that is good. Mind you, you're not there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it could be, yes, things are real bad right now. No, yeah, the church is actually going through it. Like things are not working the way they should. You know what? It's okay, because it's going to get better. How is it going to get better? Because people like you are going to get up and give some ideas. People like you are going to try to help and make this work.
And put in the effort. Because that's the other thing. Because there are people that will be like, oh, but I gave 53 ideas. Oh, I asked people, let's get together and let's do this. But did you really do a great job at that? You know, there's people that just do stuff to just check it off the box. Oh, I gave 3 ideas. First of all, were they good ideas? And second of all, did you execute them to the potential that they could have been executed at?
You know effort. So this is not elementary school. Effort is not enough. And I think, and this is a whole nother podcast, but effort is not enough sometimes. Your intent is not enough. Yeah. You know what I mean? And effort, because there are people that, you know, put some effort into something, but that's not right. You know what I mean? It's not, the strategy wasn't right. The plan wasn't right. You know, that effort, that's not, you know, we need to raise that standard a little bit higher.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It needs to be beyond effort, beyond, you know, I thought it would be okay. No, like you need to really sit back, think, focus, learn, execute. How can I make this work? You know, and before you even decide to step out of a church and into a different one, I truly believe that God has to like let you know.
Yeah.
And this isn't like you know, I had a dream like 2 weeks ago and I just remembered, and it was like me like walking through this door, and I really think that it was God like telling me like, like no, like you have to be sure.
Yes.
Before you make a move like this. You know what I mean? You can feel like you don't want to be somewhere. Trust. You can feel like, you know, I can't, like, I don't want, right? And that's okay. You better bring all of that to the Lord and let him know how you feel. Right? And tell him, God, like, you know, let me know. Is it me? Dude, should I stay? Should I go? And if God ain't telling you to go anywhere, I would stay. Yeah. And I would fight. And I would push through. And does it get tiring? Absolutely. Does it suck? Absolutely. You know, can you think of all the things that it's not fair? It's not fair. It's not fair. Yep. You know, it's not. But again, this is where God has you. This is who you are. This is where you are. And if God is not moving you to a different location, God is not moving you to something new, then you better stay put.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, what you need to walk away with, our listeners, from today's episode is, if you find yourself at that crossroad where you're kind of starting to feel that, you know, maybe I should go to a different church, maybe I need to experience something else, really evaluate yourself. Have you done everything you can? Did you give 110 effort, you know, into everything? You know, did you have to be sure. And then if you're sure that you did everything, now sit and wait for God to give you the green light. Don't use your little checklist as your permission slip. That is not your permission slip. You made that. God didn't give you the green light for that. So once you feel that peace from God, however it comes to you, and you know what, the dream thing is a funny thing, but you never know. Maybe God speaks to you through dreams. So then make sure that it's crystal clear and not a situation where, you know, a water bottle hit me on the head and then I interpret that as water, which is Jesus. And no, you went
that's the thing. When people want to leave a church, man, the birds start talking, rocks start moving, things at night start, like, you know what I mean? Like,
that stuff you got to pray about.
I know. I'm telling you, you know what I mean? When people want to leave, they will let you know. And come up with all the things, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's important too, like, even when you receive like word from God, to also don't manipulate it to fit your circumstance. You know, there may be God may give you a word 3 months ago, a word about something, and then now you find yourself in this situation, so you manipulate it to be like, oh, that's why God, no, he didn't say that because of that. You're just trying to use that as an excuse to justify what you're doing.
God is clear, and I don't think God would tell you something and then have you try to figure it out and put the pieces together and be like, oh, that's why he said that, and then at that time too it makes sense, you connect the two. No, like, it's clear. And if there's a moment where God is giving you the green light to move, great, he gave you the green light. Is it the time now,
or are you even going to the right place?
Right,
that's a whole nother bag of chips.
And exactly, it's like, then where are you going? A lot of times people leave and it's like, okay, I'm leaving now, I gotta go find somewhere to go. It's like, you know what I mean? Again, if there's a reason that you feel God is moving you and God is leading you, all those things will be put in place and in order. You know, are there seasons where I think God wants you to rely on him and trust in him? And, you know, it may be like, God, like, you gave me this word, I did it, and it just seems a little, you know what, there are moments where that may be your story, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's everyone's, right? And just because that's how God did it with so-and-so doesn't mean that's the way God is going to do it with you.
Absolutely. So once again, if you find yourself in that situation, pray about it, really think about it, self-evaluate, and if you feel like God is asking you to make that move, then you make it the right way. You make it with wisdom. You speak to the people you have to speak with. You make sure that everything is aligned and you feel peace in doing it, and that you're not doing it like they say, un pollo sin cabeza, running around like a chicken without its head. So thank you once again for tuning into the latest episode of the Guy Life Culture Podcast.
Yes, like always, we want to remind you, follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook at God Life Culture Podcast. You can check out our visuals all on YouTube. At YouTube, you can search under God Life Culture Podcast.
Yep.
Be sure to subscribe, share our podcast with a friend, post it on your social media, get the word out there, and leave a comment, right? Have you ever, felt this way? Have you struggled with, wanting to move on from a certain place, whether it's a job, a school or a church, right? And how you handled that.
Yeah, and what happened? Did God, send an angel to speak to you? Did a water bottle hit you on the head?
Right.
So thank you once again for tuning into the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.